Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Have You Tried Not Being a Podcast? Here on that hashtag show. I am your host, Yael Teagle, joined by my amazing panel as always. Hello, Chris Lamb.
Hey, Yael, how are you?
I'm good. I switched it up this time and I threw everybody off. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Hello, Toni Sanchez.
That's me. Hi.
Hi. This is the new episode of Have You Tried Not Being a Podcast? Let's jump into this week's discussion. We are talking about queer people of color portrayals of queer characters that are people of color, portrayals of queer characters by people of color, by queer people of color. These are the things we're discussing this week because we've realized that TV does not necessarily have a lot of people that are actually queer, actually people of color. I know that sounds wild to think about, that we're used to seeing white people playing people of color, which I think is awful, or people playing other cultures.
Right.
It's a weird thing to say out loud. And as I said it, I was like, is that correct? Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
When I ask you, who is the first queer person of color on TV or in movies or in pop culture in general that you can think of, who comes to mind?
I mean, we kind of talked about this with the groundbreaking episode. For me, it was RuPaul.
Yeah.
Just because I was growing up at a time when RuPaul just took off. You know, they were in movies, they were getting their own television shows. They had a talk show. They were becoming like spokesmodels for when they did the Mac Viva Glam makeup campaign. So it just seemed like that was it, right? And then became, the influx of when people realized like, oh, we might actually be able to put gay people on television and in movies, and this might actually be a fun thing to do, and people will actually come and give us their money. For every person of color that I could mention, there's 10 others that are just queer white, either actors or characters. And yeah, so I really did feel like this was just a topic that we really needed to touch on and really focus on a very specific part of our community, just because the conversation does become very focused on white queer, especially white gay men. I mean, let's face it, there's a substantial amount of the conversation that just becomes focused on that community alone. And not that they should be left out or excluded, but it's like there are many different, micro communities within the overall community that do need to be addressed and do deserve representation.
Absolutely. Chris, who do you think of?
The two characters from Rent, Angel and
Wow.
Collins. Yes.
Yeah, the first one that came to mind when we discussed this topic and we're like, this is what we're going to talk about, for some reason, Naya Rivera as Santana in Glee was the first thing that came to mind. And I went, Naya Rivera is not queer.
No.
So there's that. But then I thought about, what about now? One of the best, I think, portrayals that I can think of right now is Alex Newell on Zoey's Extraordinary Playlist, who was originally on Glee Project and then was on Glee. And it takes me a long time to refer to Alex Newell by their name because I definitely want to call them Unique, which was their name on Glee. It's silly. So their character Mo on Zoey's playlist uses he, him pronouns, and his partners are always men of color as well, which I think is so interesting. And I love that this show is doing that. And it is nice to see a change.
I've actually watched that show. I enjoy it quite a bit, even though I think that show definitely would have benefited from Mo being the lead rather than Zoey, just because, Zoey. But I was really excited at the idea that character could have been any number of people, right? And it's so obvious that they built the character around Alex Newell, the person, and their abilities and talents as a performer and as a singer, which I think is, incredibly important, just to be able to showcase an entertainer and actor's abilities, but also be able to also portray a character that also has the authenticity, right? It's a person where I believe Alex Newell also uses he, him pronouns in his own personal life, but enjoys, wearing feminine clothing, or what we would categorize as feminine clothing. So I do appreciate that there is the authenticity there. Great choice.
I honestly also need to make sure it's pointed out that Alex Newell being seen on screen as a a different body type than we've ever seen on screen is amazing. To see a plus size actor where at no point is that a point of discussion or plot. And he's so stylish. Like the outfits are incredible. It just needs to be applauded and appreciated, because I think that, I mean, I know that we don't see that on TV enough or at all.
Absolutely.
I also have to bring up more recent representation of bi characters. I think that that's really fascinating, because I know that over the years there's been a lot of bi-erasure, or the idea of the like slutty characters bi just because they're slutty. So I really want to make sure that we bring up some amazing bi characters like Kat from the Bold type, also named Kat Tamine over on Law and Order Special Victims Unit, The Greatest Show of All Time. That's the full title. I don't know if Jamie Gray Hyder, if she is bi, but her character Kat is on SVU. And of course, over on Riverdale, we have the Shoney ship. So like there's a lot of bisexuality happening, which is nice.
I also wanted to add in, I recently read that Tessa Thompson identifies as bi, and also Valkyrie is bi in the cinematic universe, correct?
Yes. It is canon that has not been shown yet, allegedly.
Mm-hmm.
I'll believe it when I see it.
Right.
Same.
I appreciate it. Show me.
Yep.
Yeah, I think we kind of touched a little bit on just sort of like the three categories that are popping up whenever we do talk about portrayals of queer people of color, right? We talked about real life examples, you know, in the case of like RuPaul, you know, whereas RuPaul, you know, especially now with Drag Race, that's a docuseries. It's a reality TV show, but it's technically a docuseries, and there is an element of realism there, even though it is exaggerated and heightened and, you know, set up for the purpose of a game show, essentially. We also have to address Paris is Burning. Without Paris is Burning, we just would not have the queer culture that we know it today. There's so much within just, you know, our slang, the way in which we have been able to uplift certain aspects and, you know, of our community that directly come from that documentary. And I just kind of want to make sure that we take the moment to just address that we would have nothing if not for the Black and transgender LGBT communities and ballroom culture, especially from that particular time and that particular place of 1980s New York. So shout out to them. If you haven't seen Paris is Burning, shame on you, go do it now. The other categories that we kind of fall into where the realistic portrayals, right, where we kind of get into the categories of queer POC content creators, right? And I don't want to embarrass Chris Lamb, but I am going to bring up OG BuzzFeed.
All live.
No, but I mean, listen, before I moved out here and decided to start creating content and start becoming a writer, I just worked a corporate job, and I spent a lot of time at my corporate job watching OG BuzzFeed. And I always appreciated the fact that there was a place for a very strong pool of queer people of color that were not only in front of the camera, but from my perception, behind the camera as well. So, Chris, thank you. I want to thank you because you are the person I'm going to direct that to, even though you were kind of representing an entire community. But I mean, the fact that everyone has kind of dispersed and kind of started to do their own thing, and it just has spread out from there. Yeah, that was incredibly huge to see, you know, these sort of scripted, you know, content, but also something where it's like, you know, the videos where they're like, I'm going to try this particular trend or try this particular food. And it's just like, oh, that's really great, where I don't have to worry about content necessarily centering completely on, you know, queer identity. And I can just see people living their lives. And that was awesome and great. So yeah, I'm sorry, Chris, but I love you and I respect you so much. And I was so excited that you're a part of this. So yeah.
Thank you. That's so nice. I really do appreciate that. Yeah. I don't have much to add to that besides like I do have a colored history with BuzzFeed, but you know, I am very grateful for the visibility that they offered, and I really do think that I really learned a lot from all of the people that I worked with, and I'm really glad that so many have moved on to continue to do amazing things.
I think one of the other great things that, you know, has come out of that is that there was a time when some companies and companies that had content creators decided that they wanted to make sure that they had a variety of people. And that helps influence other companies that do content creation to also do that. So, it is kind of a domino effect. It's this weird thing where someone has to prove that it works before other people will do it.
And we kind of touched on the fact that, we have had great queer POC portrayals, but they were played by people who were not queer themselves. And it kind of places us in a spot where we just have to make sure that we are, at the very least, acknowledging that, and then maybe even have to take a step further and unpack that. But I definitely want to assert that there have been great portrayals, from folks who are not part of our community and who have approached it from a place of respect and wanting to make sure that they do infuse that portrayal with as much authenticity as they possibly can, being from outside of the community. And then, of course, the gold standard, which is queer people of color being played by actual queer people of color, when we can move to a place where Hollywood is actually giving opportunities to members of our community, especially POC members of our community, and we don't necessarily have to rely on Scarlett Johansson doing the most for all of us, just carrying that burden. Thank you so much, Scarlett.
It's great that you bring that up, because Javicia Leslie, who plays Ryan, the new Batwoman over on Batwoman, is a queer Black woman, and she is playing a queer Black woman, and it is really nice to see that. And I know that we have not really touched upon a lot this idea of who's allowed to play these characters, and that's not what today's episode's about, but I do think that it needs to be appreciated that we are moving towards seeing this happen, because sometimes we see straight people playing queer people and it's not done respectfully. It's done very stereotypically, and it might be the writing, and it might be the acting, it might be the actor's choice, but if there was a queer person there, they could have said something.
Right. I mean, immediately I always think of Elena from One Day at a Time, where Isabella Gomez, who plays Elena Alvarez, she herself, to my knowledge, is not queer. She is a straight, white passing Latina woman. So she has acknowledged that she does come from a place of extreme privilege, and that much of her education has come as courtesy of the show, just because she did start when she was unquestionably a young girl, and there were things that she just didn't have to think about, just being a person of privilege. And I did read an article where she says that, the responsibility that she feels to play the character, that she's like, I really do rely a lot on my writers. I don't have the breakdown of the One Day at a Time writers room, but just from the fact that there was I felt it was a respectful portrayal. It was definitely something where, especially dealing with homophobia within the Latina community, where it's like, that is something that we have to address, and it was something that could be approached with heart and in care, but also levity and humor in a way, so that way it's accessible and palatable to audiences that may be dealing with that. Again, the problem of teaching straight people to be compassionate to queer people. But I cannot tell you how much I appreciated where I think it's like Rita Moreno gives a 90-second monologue about how she goes from being like, it goes against God, all the way to like, well, who the hell am I to go against God if God makes everybody in their image and God makes no mistakes? And then it's just like, oh, she's fine and great. It took 90 seconds. Fantastic, Rita Moreno. Loved it. And it's a funny, exaggerated thing, but it was like, I just loved it. So I definitely feel like, yes, straight people have been able to do those sorts of respectful portrayals. However, I think we all as a community can agree that there's a conversation there about why is it that the trend is straight people are getting the opportunities to play queer people, and maybe those opportunities need to first and foremost go to queer people, especially queer people of color.
Yeah, I think it's really important to, in this conversation, to just quickly, I know that this could be another podcast episode, but I do want to say my opinion that I don't necessarily agree with the mindset that I think we've had before of like, oh, well, you are the actor, and so you have the power to say no to this, right? Like if like two actors who we tell that, oh, well, you should have just turned down the role, because most actors, they're all struggling to make their dreams come true. They're all waiting tables, they're all doing shit jobs they don't want to do to pursue their dreams. And so I think that's also a very classist thing to say to someone, depending on where the actor comes from, to tell them that, well, you should just turn down the role then, like just for your own morals. It's more on the studios to think about it, and also, of course, on actors who do have the level of fame and clout that they have, where they do have that privilege of being able to say no to roles now, like ScarJo.
I was going to say Scarlett Johansson has the power where she could say no to things. Again, it is something we should discuss and will discuss in a future episode. But I think the biggest thing that people don't seem to grasp when we say this is the reason we would like this role of a queer character to go to a queer actor is because the role of a straight character does not go to queer actors, right? So straight people can play both straight and gay. Queer people are not given that opportunity as well. That's the issue.
Yeah,
I can only think of one. I'm sorry, I can only think of one example, and that was Neil Patrick Harris in How I Met Your Mother playing serial womanizer Barney Stinson.
Yeah.
But any other time that I immediately think of, like, when you asked us earlier, like, who was the first time you ever saw a queer person on screen? My actual answer should be Cesar Romero in old school Batman, the 1960s Batman series. But there was such secrecy, and even still to this day, where it's like, is he or isn't he? Confirmed bachelor, was always the guy about town, and mostly that is portrayed as sort of like the straight propaganda that he had to feed people in order to keep working as, like, the Latin leading man. So yeah, we haven't had a lot of opportunities to have, visibly, out and about queer people playing queer
that's
characters.
The key is that a lot of them weren't out when they got the chance to play straight characters, like Matt Bowman in White Collar was not publicly out,
right? And NPH is the only one that immediately comes to mind, where it's like a gay who hasn't already, and it's not like a limited series or a limited, like, particular. Yeah, that's the only one that I can really think of.
All right, any last queer POC portrayals we wanted to address?
I do want to shout out, it's brand new. It's Rutherford Falls on Peacock. It's making a lot of waves because it's starring, a native cast. 5 out of the 7 writers in the room are native writers. But I want to shout out, and I'm gonna mess up this last name. Jessie Lee or Desi Lei is a non-binary Chinese American actor who plays the character of Bobby Yang, who is the intern / assistant to the Ed Helms character. They are hilarious. They are fantastic. The show never once takes a shot at their ethnicity or their gender identity or sexuality. They are just allowed to be funny. But I appreciated the fact that there just was somebody who was there and allowed to exist and allowed to just be funny. And they never once had to take a cheap shot at them, because immediately my mind went to Lloyd from Entourage, where it just was like, every time somebody spoke to Lloyd, it inevitably was some sort of like cheap shot about the fact that he was gay and Asian and femme. It's like, oh, never mind.
Yeah.
But yeah, Bobby Yang, Rutherford Falls, check that out.
I also I think I mentioned the show a lot, but I really do love Hose on FX. Everyone there, I believe, is like accurately casted to their character in terms of their identity for the most part. I also want to give a quick shout out to my friend Sherry Cola on Good Trouble, who plays Alice Kwan. And I guess just super quickly, I also just wanted to throw out there, I also find it an interesting thing when people play queer characters, but then they're very not out about their identity. I don't have like a set feeling on like, you should come out, or like you should, say who you're dating. Because I understand that there's a need to keep that private, and I really respect that integrity towards your private life. But it also like prevent us from like being able to properly critique or like see like, are studios like properly casting this, or not properly, but like casting this more accurately to the identity, or are they not?
I think. Sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to quickly mention that for me, I was thinking about Ncuti Gatwa, who plays Eric on Sex Education, and Leah Lewis, who plays Ellie too, on half of it. On a quick Google search, I couldn't find for either of them. I think both of them are keeping it under wraps. Leah is dating someone, but I'm not gonna do the whole biracial thing of just because she's dating a man that means that she's not queer or something. But
right. I think those are really great questions. I know that sometimes, I think I said it before, but like an example, it's not a person of color, but Mitch and Cam on Modern Family, right? One of them was gay and one of them wasn't, and sometimes it felt like the portrayal of a straight man playing a gay man was kind of over the top, kind of in a stereotypical way. And I remember there was a scene, I feel like I've brought this up before. There was like a specific scene where he had to tell Ed O'Neill to pretend to be gay to distract some other person. And all three actors, first of all three, I believe, white actors, were all straight men playing gay. And I was like, this does not feel good to watch. It makes you think about who's making these decisions and what their intentions are. What is the joke? Because being in on a joke is fun. Being the butt of a joke is not.
Right.
The other thing that does happen on a more positive note is that we've seen there are actors who are straight or were straight when they took the role and have through the role realized that they are not. So for example, over on Winona Earp, I know that the woman who plays Waverly through her experience on the show has realized that she is queer. So, you know, who's to say who should take the role?
Right. Oh my God. I think that if, as again, you know, we talk about respect and care and making sure that you're trying to infuse a portrayal with as much authenticity as possible, it becomes I think what it really does boil down to is that when you have a straight person playing a queer character, especially, God forbid, if you have a straight non-POC person playing a queer POC character, you're playing a lot of games of telephone. Instead of you actually pulling from your own personal experience, you're having to rely, like, for example, Isabella Gomez, who says that she has to rely on the writers and that she's like, they know what they're doing. And like, that's, I'm just a vessel. I'm just the person who's actually in front of the screen or in front of the camera. Wouldn't it be great though? And we have seen it is great when you do have people who are able to pull from their own personal experience and say like, well, I think I should do it this way. Or I know for a fact we have to do it this way because otherwise this particular detail just is not something that this character or the community is going to be at all okay with. And that's fantastic. And I think that's ultimately, we just want to cut down and reduce the amount of times we're having to play telephone. You know, you want to be able to just have somebody who's like, I've lived it. I know it. It's great, especially since we are in this moment where we're still trying to get to a good moment where we feel like not every single piece of representation has to live up to a standard because there is so few of those examples out there. I also just wanted to take the moment to just kind of also shout out reality TV. Kind of touched on it a little bit, but reality TV has been giving a lot more opportunities for queer people of color to be themselves, or at least a version of themselves, right? So shows like RuPaul's Drag Race, where consistently every year those casts are at least like 10 plus people, you know, gay men of every background. And it's definitely the first time that I've ever seen, actually, as a Native American person, actually getting to see a queer Native American person on television. Stacey Lane Matthews, Trixie Mattel, other up and coming queens that like I otherwise would never be able to find them because I don't live in their particular cities, right? I also do want to also shout out the POC hosts of Queer Eye. Even going all the way back to Jay, who was the only person in the OG Queer Eye cast that was holding it down. And also, to bring it back full circle, when I saw Rent for the first time on Broadway, Jay was playing the role of Angel on Broadway. They were fantastic. It was amazing. But I also want to Tan France and Karamo Brown, I believe they're both married. They both are having or have kids or are having kids. So I just think it's like great visibility, especially for how popular that show has been, and especially how groundbreaking the show tends to be in visibility for our communities, and how popular they are. I mean, everybody from those shows are incredibly popular, but especially like those three in particular, like, love them.
Well, on that note, let's move on to our next segment, which is New Crush of the Week.
Yeah. Ooh, Sailor Moon! I don't know her.
So this is our fun segment where we talk about who we're crushing on right now, and I'm gonna start because it was the Queen's birthday. Lizzo, it was her birthday, and she went to Vegas, I believe, based on the photos, on a private plane. She is living her best life, and I am crushing on her for her birthday.
My crush of the week is Telly Leung. Telly has been one of those people that really paved the way and kind of has, I don't want people to forget about all of the work that he's done because he was one of the first, musical theater people that I believe has been like more out than others have in the past. And I just really hope that we don't forget about him, and I hope that he gets his show, because I think if he's way overdue for like being the star of a show, like on TV and film. He's fine in musical theater. He's totally fine, but you know.
Awesome.
I am crushing on Jenna Schmieding. I really hope I'm saying that last name right, Schmieding. She is the star of Rutherford Falls. I'm sorry, I binged that show this weekend and I love it. It's probably my brand new favorite show of all time. And I think that my attraction for her is probably based on that whole narcissistic thing that we all do, where we all kind of like are low-key attracted to people that remind us of ourselves. So she's like a plus size Native woman, and I just find her totally adorable. And the character itself is like that she plays on Rutherford Falls is so funny, so charming. She joined the show as a writer, and then they were just like, you know, why don't you actually play the person that you're writing? And she's like, okay, I guess I have a TV show now. I guess I'm the piece of the TV show now. Isn't that amazing? Like, I'm just like,
that's amazing.
That's
the
a great
power
story.
she holds.
I know that's like a classic like Hollywood story, right? Of like just being like like discovered and right, like oh my god, right? Like that 50s of like, get me that girl in the background. I want to make her a star.
You want to be a model? I would love to. Thank you.
Yes.
You want a TV show? I would love one. Thank you. Such a great show. I love it. But yeah, such a crush on that lady. I'm gonna geek out if I ever meet her. I really hope she doesn't watch this. This is gonna be so embarrassing. Nobody send this to her. Nobody. Do not tag her.
Okay, well, this will be sent to her. All right. Well, those are our crushes this week. Let us know who you are crushing on if you're watching us on YouTube. Then in the comments, if you're listening to us wherever you listen to podcasts, comment on the podcast. Who are you crushing on? Let us know. Maybe we will read them out loud on our next time we do this. But now it is time for some headlines and some queer news. I want a sound effect there, but there is none. So I made one with my mouth.
Dun, 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 dun.
Thanks, everybody. All right. Let me read some news to you because we've got a lot going on. So President Biden is nominating 2 trailblazing LGBTQ plus activists to high-ranking posts in the Department of Defense. So first is Brenda Sue Fulton, a lesbian activist for Assistant Secretary of Manpower and Reserve Affairs. In this role, Fulton will serve as a key advisor for U.S. military personnel affairs. Alongside Fulton, Biden is also nominating Sean Skelly, a transgender national security expert, for the role of Assistant Secretary of Defense for Readiness. This role is crucial in overseeing the U.S. military force and health affairs overseas. This is incredible.
Incredible.
I'm so excited.
In other news, the NYC Unity Project. So New York City has launched a citywide programming initiative in partnership with national LGBTQ plus homeless youth services provider Ali Forney Center called NYC Unity Project, which will work with clients to provide employment for homeless and runaway LGBTQ plus youth. Launching July 1st, the program is set to connect 90 people between 16 and 24 years old with jobs or paid internships at businesses committed to fostering inclusive work environments. Hell yes. So if you have the means to, please consider donating to the Ali Forney Center through their website as well. Just thought I would plug them because they're awesome.
All right, guys. Well, to bring it down a notch, I'm sorry, but this week in Problematic Queer People, it's been a heavy couple of weeks for problematic queer people. Beauty influencer James Charles has been demonetized by YouTube in the wake of cascading sexual misconduct allegations. Infamously conservative Republican Caitlyn Jenner is now running for governor of California. And former Bachelor Colton Underwood came out as gay, but then we were all reminded of the stalking and harassment allegations against him. So Chris, Yael, are we under any obligation to support or give the benefit of the doubt to these highly visible members of our community?
No.
No.
Next question. In our next segment, just kidding.
Here's the thing. No, we definitely are not under any obligation to give our support or benefit of the doubt just because they are members of the community. In fact, as members of the community, we are obligated to believe victims. So I think that is the key, especially in terms of the James Charles and Colton Underwood situation. As for Caitlyn Jenner running for governor, I think that my experience in politics and Caitlyn Jenner's experience in politics are equal in that neither of us should be running for governor.
I'd vote for you, though.
Absolutely.
I would definitely
I would
vote for
100%
you
vote for you.
over Caitlyn Jenner.
But people will vote for Caitlyn Jenner. Like, there are also people going, correct, she's unqualified, but I'd vote for her. No, neither of us should be
Which is the
running.
exact same thing that people said about the Cheeto. That's the exact same thing that people said. People were like, yes, I agree that he's not good for the job, but I will still vote for him. I really wanted to talk about this topic because I think that there is a issue with, I don't even like calling like our current political climate like identity politics, because I first heard it from like alt-right people saying like, oh, you know, like everyone's just like so caught up in identity politics. But if we're using that terminology, I agree that identity is at a forefront, you know, of conversations much more than it is than before. It's really important to still offer people a degree of humanity when we consider their identity. And part of considering that humanity is understanding that they are flawed human beings. And that means that we do not have to listen, support, or believe somebody just because they hold a certain identity. Because part of understanding and empathizing with humanity is understanding also that no matter what group you're part of, there's always going to be shitbags.
Right.
Absolutely.
And that's there's, you know, we've seen it in media, you know, since we do talk about media on this podcast quite a bit. We've seen that, you know, the sort of like perfect queer person where they are just sort of held as like, oh, they're queer, but they are, you know, they're in love and they're monogamous and they, you know, volunteer every weekend to feed homeless puppies, and it's just like, you know, the perfect, you know, it's an offshoot of the model minority, you know, sort of trope, right? So I think it's important to recognize that, like, yes, we do have problematic members of our own community. And in the case of like, you know, Caitlyn Jenner, where it's like, yay for, you know, for her, for in order to even attain a certain profile in which running for governor might actually be a legitimate thing that could happen. That's cool and that's great. But knowing what I know about her politics and how my politics just don't at all mesh at all, like that's somebody where I'm like, no, I'm still going to hold that person incredibly responsible, especially since, you know, in that specific instance, they have said things where I'm just like, oh, you're a member of this community and you're saying things that are at the very least problematic for other members in your community and could be damaging to the community as a whole. Like, I'm definitely going to hold you responsible and accountable. You don't just get blind loyalty and support just because you are a person in this community.
Like, especially to our young impressionable listeners, like I really do want to emphasize that we need to, I think it's really important during this time, like in this current cultural climate, to not relearn, but to like remind ourselves that we can acknowledge someone's identity while still being like, but I still don't like what you're saying. I'm not, none of us, we're coming for Caitlyn Jenner's trans identity by saying that we do not want them to be in public office. And I think it can be very easy, because I've seen it in my own communities, to be honest. I've seen people conflate like I don't like what you said, and people are like, well, how could you say that to someone who is a queer woman? And I'm like, that doesn't, your identity doesn't change the fact that what you said is problematic.
It reminds me of when Mayor Pete was running for president, because the assumption was Mayor Pete has the gay vote, and Mayor Pete does not. So I would say that Caitlyn Jenner does not. She does not also automatically get the trans vote or the queer vote. Or
I do not claim. We do not claim Pete. He's not invited to the potluck. He's not invited to any potluck.
Right. Well, then the flip side of that also is that they are going to be utilized by people with malicious intentions, as they're going to weaponize their identity and say like, well, see, we've got one of those and we're supporting, you know, this trans candidate, and, you know, not only are they they're female, and it's like, yeah, and this is a great moment for, you know, for visibility and representation, and it's like that. No, you're just trying to erect what you believe is as a bulletproof shield, because that's what they perceive identity politics to be. The minute we start talking about our identities in terms of race or gender or sexuality, oh, well, now we become, you know, beyond reproach. Like, no, you can. Every member of this community definitely has done something they're probably not proud of, right? And we deserve to apologize, make amends, and be called out for that shit. Absolutely. And these other highly visible people, like, yeah. And while we are kind of fixating on Caitlyn Jenner, because it's just sort of like politics is an easy thing to talk about, or much easier than, for example, sexual and harassment, allegations, sexual misconduct and harassment allegations. And, it's just like, obviously we want justice to be done, and we want those investigations to be thorough and impartial, and for whatever we can do in order to make sure that we're not supporting somebody who quite possibly could be a predator, or at the very least could have violent or just damaging attitudes and behaviors. Like, yeah, that person needs to be, at the very least, Colton Underwood doesn't need a Netflix show. Like, that's just not how we should be handling that situation. That's my opinion.
Right. And like having their sponsor, the influencer content, having their sponsorship limited at least. Like in regards to the James Charles thing, like I was mentioning this before we were recording. Like I'm not in any way condoning this behavior, obviously. Like I don't think it's right to do this no matter what age you are, and no matter what sexuality you are, no matter like how big or small you are as in terms of your following. I really want to doubly emphasize that like I'm not saying that this is okay, but I also do want to remind people that like James Charles is a very young person, and that fame, as we've seen with many people in the past, does really screw over your perception of what you're allowed to do and what type of power that you have. It screws with your head, and none of us can say what we would have done if we had that level of power that of like influence that he had. Again, not saying that it's okay, but I'm more saying that like I just really wish that we could have a culture where we don't lift up people that young, because I'm convinced that like people that young just don't know how to handle like that level of notoriety. Because we've seen this way too many times. Like I've seen this too many times in so many of the sub YouTube communities that I've part of or privy to.
Well, and then we're also talking about a power dynamic too, where or specifically in that James Charles case, some of it is about him soliciting either inappropriate images or messages from very, very young fans. I don't know all the ins and outs, but from what I understand, some of those particular victims were underage at the time. Yeah, so I think we're all in agreement here, where it's like we have a responsibility as responsible members of our community to hold the people in our community responsible or accountable, and we're not just going to go ahead and lend our support just on the basis of their identity. Yeah, so good for us for being good people. Yeah, good for you and for you.
Thanks. Well, speaking of good people, we are spotlighting LGBTQ plus owned companies, especially ones that are giving back to our community. Yay. So today I want to tell you about Bowtie Behavior. So Black-owned business Bowtie Behavior comes from Bronx native Robbie, who founded the company in 2014 when attending a bridal shower and couldn't find any affordable bow ties to fit their style. So without any formal education in fashion or design, Robbie has a BA in journalism and an MA in sports management. Bowtie Behavior was created. Robbie's intent was to create a bold and flavorful piece that outfits are built around. So in honor of our partnership, Bowtie Behavior is giving away one bow tie from their Lunch in Paris design. And we've got the giveaway details for you in just a minute, because if you want to get yourself a bow tie of any design, Bowtie Behavior is offering a discount code for the rest of 2021. Use the code hashtag for 10% off. That is HASHTAG for 10% off, good through December 31st, 2021. So now the details of the giveaway. To enter to win Bowtie Behavior's Lunch in Paris bow tie from Have You Tried Not Being a Podcast? You must do the following to enter. You must like the post for the giveaway on our Instagram. You must tag a friend in the comments of that post, and you must follow the 5 accounts on Instagram. That hashtag show, my account, Chris's account, Toni's account, and we'll tell you in just a few where to find those, and Bowtie Behavior's account, which is at Bowtie_behavior. The deadline to enter our giveaway is May 24th, and we will announce our winner on our May 28th episode. So that is the giveaway. And we will tell you in just a sec where to find us on the internet to make sure you follow on Instagram. Thank you again to Bowtie Behavior and Robbie over there. So that's it. That's our show. Where can everyone find you? Where do they need to follow for the giveaway? We'll start with Chris.
Oh, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm. You can find me on One Winged Chris. I am going to be back on TikTok, hopefully. And also, this might be a little bit short notice by the time that this episode comes out, but I still really wanted to plug this charity stream that I've been working on and producing myself for literally an entire month. So this is going to be an all Asian American one-shot tabletop RPG show. We're raising money for Hate is a Virus in response to all of the acts of violence against my community, and also in celebration of AAPI Heritage Month. It's going to be on May 1st, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. for our character creation session, and then 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. for the actual game. It's going to be on the Twitch account for Roll20. Those are the people that are hosting the thing for me. Super grateful for them. And I also have gotten the likes of Jimmy Wong and Rock and Sakura from Drag Race, Toni. And there will be Tiltify tiers. Donation tiers will be available for people to interact with the show, to make things harder for us or to help us, depending on what you buy. But yeah, I really hope to see some people there. Definitely let me know on the chat. I'm going to try to keep up with it while I'm staying in character and everything, but I would love to know if you're coming from the show.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. And I hope everyone checks that out over on Roll20's Twitch channel. Toni, where are you on Instagram and what are you up to?
I'm on all the social medias at the Toni Sanchez, Toni with an I, Sanchez with a Z. If you come over to my Twitter, you can catch me cyberbullying the Oscars for that debacle. That's fun. Yeah, but yeah, I'm everywhere. The Instagram, Twitter. I have a TikTok, but I don't make content. I just kind of creep on everybody else's content, including Chris's. So yeah, follow me.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I'm Yael Teagle. I'm everywhere at Yael Teagle. That's YAELTYGIEL. I'm also on twitch.tv/Yael Teagle, attempting to play Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past on Super Nintendo. Attempting is the keyword there. I also host a Law & Order Special Victims Unit after show called Law & Order S Review on Fanversation, and I talk superheroes on Super Lady Hero Hour, also on Fanversation. If you need to know where those are, you can just tweet at me at Yael Teagle and I'll tell you. Thank you so much for joining us here on Have You Tried Not Being a Podcast? We'll see you next time.
Is there like a Yael Teagle calendar? Is that something that I can get off of your Instagram? Because I just feel like every time you've got a new podcast that I need to like desperately listen.
I'll make a graphic.
Wonderful. Fantastic.
I mean,
take us out, Sarah.
Yeah.